I still remember the first time I introduced Emily to Jason. It was a chilly Saturday morning in late November, the kind of day when the air feels crisp and the leaves crunch loudly under your boots. I had dragged Emily to my apartment because I wanted her opinion on whether the sweater I bought for Jason's birthday looked good or not. She sat cross-legged on my bed, sipping coffee and teasing me about how nervous I always got when buying him gifts. Jason came by unexpectedly, holding a bag of bagels and his usual easy grin. That was the first time they met. I remember thinking how nice it was that two of the most important people in my life were finally in the same room. At that moment, it never crossed my mind that one day they would be together. And not just together, but engaged. Back then, everything felt simple. Emily had been my best friend since high school. We survived awkward prom nights, shared dorm rooms in college, cried on each other's shoulders when the world felt too heavy. She knew every detail of my relationship with Jason. Every fight, every reconciliation, every doubt, every moment of joy. She was the first person I called when Jason and I had our first serious argument. And she was the one who reassured me that he was worth fighting for. Sometimes, I wonder now if those conversations planted seeds in her mind. Little insights into the cracks in our relationship, things she could later use to slip into his world when I was no longer there. Jason and I were together for almost 3 years. 3 years of birthdays, holidays, lazy Sundays with takeout and Netflix, long road trips with playlists we'd built together, but also 3 years of small misunderstandings, arguments that felt bigger than they should, silences that stretched too long. Toward the end, I felt like we were both drifting, but I held on because I believed love was supposed to be about patience and compromise. Emily was always there, listening, nodding, telling me I was stronger than I thought. I trusted her with pieces of my heart I didn't even share with Jason. When we finally broke up, it wasn't explosive. It was one of those quiet endings, the kind where you sit across from each other at the kitchen table and just know you can't force something to work anymore. We cried a little, promised to stay friends, and packed away the pieces of our life together. I was devastated, but I told myself I'd get through it because Emily was still by my side. She brought wine, ice cream, sat with me on the floor of my apartment while I cried into a blanket. She told me Jason was a fool for letting me go. She said I deserved someone who would see me fully and never hesitate. I believed her. That's what makes everything that came later feel like such a deep cut. Like a betrayal I could never have imagined. Even now, when I replay those nights in my head, I feel sick realising she might have been comforting me with one hand while reaching for him with the other. The first time I suspected something was off was months after the breakup. I had started to piece my life back together, going out more, picking up new hobbies, even redecorating my apartment to feel like it was truly mine and not a shared space haunted by memories. Emily was around less, which at first I chalked up to work. She had always been busy with long hours, and I thought maybe she was just giving me space to heal. But then little things started to feel strange. Like when I mentioned Jason's name in passing, and she got this tight look on her face, almost like guilt flickering behind her eyes. Or when she suddenly changed the subject whenever I asked if she had seen him around. I didn't push it because I trusted her. She was my best friend. Why would I doubt her? One evening, I was scrolling through social media after a long day at work, glass of wine in hand, when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Emily had posted a picture from a concert, the kind of concert Jason loved. The caption was vague, just lyrics from a song, but the angle of the photo, I knew it was taken from Jason's favourite section, the one he always bought tickets for. My heart sank. I tried to brush it off, telling myself maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she went with co-workers or another friend. But deep down, a small voice whispered that it wasn't random. Still, I stayed quiet. A week later, Emily cancelled our dinner plans last minute. She said she wasn't feeling well. I believed her until I stopped by her place the next day with soup, only to find her not home. Her neighbour casually mentioned she had left dressed up the night before. I laughed it off in front of him, but inside, unease began curling tighter around me. I wanted so badly to trust her that I gaslit myself into thinking I was paranoid. I told myself I was still raw from the breakup and maybe projecting. Then one night, I got a text from another friend asking if I knew Emily was at the same party as Jason. My chest tightened reading those words. I remember staring at the screen, rereading the message over and over, my heart pounding in my ears. I called Emily immediately. She answered, her voice slightly breathless, saying she was home, curled up with tea. I wanted to believe her so badly that I forced myself to. I told her I missed her, that I wished we could spend more time together. She promised soon that she was just swamped, but her lie echoed in my mind. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few months. The time she avoided questions, the cancelled plans, the way she stopped mentioning Jason altogether. I started to realise that the puzzle pieces fit together in a way I didn't want to admit. Emily wasn't just drifting away from me, she was moving closer to him. And the cruelest part, I think she wanted me to stay blind to it, to keep trusting her while she built something with the man I had once loved. The truth finally hit me one evening in the most unexpected way. I was at the grocery store, wandering through the aisles with a basket half full of random things I didn't really need, when I heard laughter, familiar laughter. I turned my head and there they were, Jason and Emily, just a few feet away near the wine section. They didn't see me at first, and I froze, my body going cold as if every ounce of blood had drained from me. Emily's hand brushed against his arm as she leaned in to show him a bottle, and Jason looked at her the way he used to look at me, with that mix of amusement and tenderness that once made me feel safe. I stood there, gripping the basket so hard the handles cut into my skin, and I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I wanted to run, to leave before they noticed, but I couldn't move, as if my shoes had been cemented to the floor. Then Emily's eyes met mine. Her smile faltered just slightly, and in that instant, everything I had been trying to deny became undeniable. She knew I saw them, and Jason turned his head too, his expression shifting into awkward surprise. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought people around us could hear it. Emily stammered something about running into each other by chance, her voice too quick, too rehearsed. But the way Jason stood close to her, the way their bodies leaned toward each other, told me everything. I managed to mumble something about being in a rush and walked away, leaving my basket abandoned in the aisle. My hands shook as I drove home, tears blurring the road, my chest so tight it felt like I might break apart. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall. The betrayal burned hotter than anything I had ever felt. Not just because Jason had moved on, but because Emily, the person I trusted more than anyone, had been hiding this from me. I thought about all the nights she held me while I cried over him, all the times she told me I deserved better, all the lies layered over lies. It felt like my entire friendship with her had been rewritten in that moment. Every memory now tainted with suspicion. Every shared laugh soured by the knowledge that she might have been waiting for her chance. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up scrolling through old pictures of us. Me and Emily at prom. Me and Jason at the beach. The three of us at a barbecue one summer. I couldn't help but wonder if somewhere deep inside, this had been building all along. Had Emily always envied what I had? Had Jason always seen something in her that he didn't see in me? The questions ate at me until the sun rose, leaving me feeling hollow, and yet, even then, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. A part of me still clung to the hope that I was wrong, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But another part of me, the quieter and more painful part, already knew the truth. I had lost not just my boyfriend, but also my best friend. In the days after that grocery store encounter, Emily barely reached out to me, and I didn't call her either. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make a move. But the silence between us grew heavier with every passing day. I felt torn in two. Part of me wanted to scream at her, demand answers, demand honesty, while another part wanted to curl up and pretend I hadn't seen anything, as if denial could somehow protect me from more pain. But the universe didn't let me stay in denial for long. 2 weeks later, I was invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. I almost didn't go because I knew Jason might be there, but I told myself I couldn't keep avoiding places just because of him. I wanted to prove I was stronger than that. I spent extra time getting ready, curling my hair, putting on the red dress Emily once called my power dress. I wanted to walk into that party feeling like I owned the room. At first, it worked. I laughed with friends, sipped my drink, and almost forgot why I had been hesitant to come. But then, just as I was starting to relax, the room shifted. Jason walked in, and right behind him, Emily. My stomach dropped. They didn't come in separately. They didn't even try to hide it. Jason had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd the way he used to guide me. My throat went dry. People around me noticed too. I saw the quick glances, the whispers, the widening eyes as realisation spread across the room. Our circle of friends had known me and Jason as a couple, had known Emily as my other half in friendship. Seeing them together was like watching two worlds collide in the ugliest way possible. Emily spotted me almost immediately. She froze for half a second, then plastered on a smile as if nothing was wrong. She walked up to me, Jason still at her side, and said, "Hey, I was gonna tell you." Her voice was light, casual, like she was announcing a new job or a vacation plan. I stared at her, unable to form words. Jason avoided my eyes, shifting uncomfortably. The music thumped around us, but it all felt muffled, like I was underwater. My chest tightened, and I finally whispered, "How long?" She hesitated, then said, "A few months." That was the breaking point. A few months meant that while she was holding me as I cried over him, while she was telling me he wasn't worth it, she was already choosing him. I felt the room spinning, hot tears threatening to spill, but I refused to let them see me break. I set my drink down, turned on my heel, and walked out without another word. I could hear Emily calling my name, but I didn't look back. That night, I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. I parked by the river eventually, just sitting in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, wondering how two people I loved the most could cut me so deeply. The days that followed felt like living in a haze. Everywhere I went, I half expected to see them together, laughing, holding hands, building a life on the ruins of mine. I deleted social media apps from my phone because every photo, every tag, every mutual friend's post felt like a landmine waiting to blow up in my face. Still, I couldn't escape it completely. People whispered. Mutual friends reached out. Some cautiously, some with anger on my behalf, others with curiosity like they were watching a scandal unfold. I hated that my heartbreak had turned into entertainment for others. What hurt the most wasn't just Jason choosing her. It was Emily, my Emily, who had once pinky promised me in high school that nothing and no one would ever come between us. I kept replaying our memories, searching for signs I had missed. The time she lingered a little too long when Jason cracked a joke, or when she asked me specific details about our fights. Details she never should have needed. Were those just normal moments, or had she been studying us, waiting for an opening? One evening, I found myself scrolling through old text threads I hadn't deleted. There it was, in black and white. Me pouring my heart out about Jason, and Emily responding with comforting words that now felt poisonous. She had written, "You deserve someone who worships the ground you walk on." And now she was standing on that ground, with him by her side. It felt cruel, almost calculated. The betrayal seeped into my daily life in ways I didn't expect. At work, I couldn't focus. I'd stare at spreadsheets without absorbing anything. I'd come home to my empty apartment and sit in silence because music, television, even reading reminded me of them somehow. My appetite disappeared and sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake until the early hours of the morning, my chest aching with a mix of anger and grief. But underneath the pain, a new feeling began to take root, a quiet, simmering fire. Betrayal has a way of hardening you, of turning sadness into determination. I told myself I wouldn't let them take everything from me. They had already stolen my trust, my history, my peace of mind, but they wouldn't steal my future. I started small, forcing myself to go back to yoga classes, picking up my journal again, writing out every ugly thought so it wouldn't rot inside me. At first it felt fake, like I was pretending to be okay when I wasn't, but little by little, those tiny actions began to stitch me back together. Still, the wound was far from healed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's smile next to Jason's, and the sting of betrayal cut all over again. I thought I could avoid them if I tried hard enough, But life has a cruel way of forcing you to face what you don't want to see. A month after that party, another mutual friend got engaged. And of course, there was an engagement dinner. I debated for days whether to go, but in the end, I didn't want to let their existence rob me of every social gathering. I told myself I was stronger now, that I could handle it. The restaurant was warm, filled with clinking glasses, laughter, and the smell of garlic bread drifting through the air. For the first half hour, I managed to enjoy myself. I caught up with friends, toasted to the happy couple, and even laughed at silly stories. But then the door opened, and there they were, Jason and Emily, walking in together like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wore a delicate gold dress that shimmered in the candlelight, and he looked at her the way he used to look at me when I walked into a room. My chest tightened, and I gripped my wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. They sat across the room, but of course people couldn't resist pointing, whispering, watching me out of the corner of their eyes to see how I would react. I hated being the object of pity, almost as much as I hated seeing them together. At one point, Emily excused herself to the bathroom, and as fate would have it, we crossed paths near the hallway. She stopped, giving me that soft, practiced smile I used to believe was genuine. "I wanted to talk to you," she said. I didn't reply at first. My throat was dry, my stomach twisting. "About what?" I finally managed. "About us," she said, lowering her voice. "I never meant for things to happen this way. Jason and I, it just happened." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Just happened. As if love was an accident. As if betrayal was something you stumbled into, instead of a choice you made every single day. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, anger burning away, the last remnants of denial. "You don't get to say that to me," I told her, my voice trembling but firm. "You don't get to act like this was some random twist of fate. You made a choice, both of you did. And now you're standing there pretending to be sorry when all you've done is lie to me." For a moment, I saw guilt flash in her eyes, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by that same stubborn pride I had seen before. She opened her mouth like she wanted to defend herself, but I walked away before she could. My hands shook as I returned to the table. My appetite gone, the noise of the room suddenly unbearable. That night when I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and cried until there was nothing left. But even through the tears, one thought anchored itself in my mind. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I finally believed her. After that night, I couldn't shake the bitterness that clung to me. It wasn't just about Jason anymore, it was about Emily, about the years of friendship I had invested, the trust I had poured into her hands only to have it crushed. I found myself replaying our high school sleepovers, the promises we whispered under blankets, swearing that no guy would ever come between us. We used to joke that we'd grow old together, rocking on porches, complaining about our knees, still laughing at the same inside jokes. That dream felt like a cruel joke now. She had stolen not only my boyfriend, but also the future of our friendship, something I thought was unshakable. One evening, unable to sleep, I dug out an old shoebox from the back of my closet. Inside were photos of me and Emily, at prom with bad makeup, at the beach during spring break with sunburns, at my first apartment unpacking boxes with pizza and laughter. Looking at those pictures felt like staring at ghosts. My chest ached as I realised how much of my identity had been intertwined with hers, how much of my life had been shaped around our bond. And now it was gone, replaced with lies and betrayal. Around that time, rumours started to circulate. A friend texted me late one night with a screenshot of Emily's hand sporting a ring. I stared at it for minutes, my heart racing, trying to convince myself it was fake, a misunderstanding. But the next morning it was everywhere. Social media posts, tagged photos, congratulatory comments. Jason had proposed. To her, I felt like the world had tilted off its axis. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the images, seeing her radiant smile, his proud expression, the ring glinting under the lights. Each picture felt like a dagger, not because he had moved on, but because she had taken my place in the story. The woman who once helped me pick out gifts for him was now showing off the ring he chose. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from people asking if I was okay. People who wanted gossip more than they wanted to comfort. I ignored them all. I turned my phone off, curled into a ball on my couch and let the tears come. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was humiliation, rage, disbelief all tangled together. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. How could I not have seen the way they looked at each other when I wasn't paying attention? But then another thought crept in, darker and sharper. Maybe they had been waiting for this moment all along. Maybe my heartbreak wasn't just collateral damage, but part of their path to happiness. That night, I vowed something quietly to myself. I wouldn't be their victim forever. The announcement of their engagement spread faster than I could process. Everywhere I went within our circle of friends, it was the only thing people seemed to talk about. I avoided gatherings, ignored calls, and even switched to a different coffee shop, just so I wouldn't accidentally run into familiar faces who might bring it up. But isolation has a way of suffocating you. The silence in my apartment grew heavy, pressing down on me until I couldn't bear it anymore. So one night, against my better judgment, I went to Emily's engagement party. I told myself it was closure, that I needed to see it with my own eyes to finally move on. The venue was decorated with white fairy lights and roses, elegant in a way that felt almost mocking. I walked in alone, heart pounding, trying to keep my breathing steady. As I scanned the room, I saw Emily in a flowing ivory dress that made her look like she was already halfway to becoming a bride. Jason stood beside her, his arm around her waist, smiling like the world had finally given him everything he wanted. The sight hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I considered leaving, but then Emily saw me. Her face lit up in surprise, and she hurried over. "You came," she said breathlessly, as if my presence was some kind of gift. I forced a polite smile, my hands clenched into fists inside my clutch. "I wanted to congratulate you," I managed, my voice even though inside I was unravelling. She looked at me with something almost like relief, as if my words absolved her. Jason nodded awkwardly, barely meeting my eyes, and muttered a quiet, "Thanks." I excused myself quickly, finding refuge near the bar where I could watch them from a distance. People laughed, clinked glasses, snapped photos, while I stood there feeling like an outsider in a story I'd once believed was mine. At one point, Emily took the microphone to thank everyone for coming. She spoke about love, about finding someone who makes you whole, about fate bringing two souls together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that fate had nothing to do with it, that she had stolen, lied, betrayed. Instead, I swallowed it all down, the bitterness burning in my chest. When she finished, our eyes met across the room. For just a second, her smile faltered. Maybe she knew exactly what I was thinking. Maybe she felt the weight of what she had done. Or maybe she didn't care at all. Leaving that party, I realised something important. I couldn't keep waiting for an apology that would never come. I couldn't keep bleeding from wounds they had no intention of healing. That night, as I walked home through the cold air, I felt the beginnings of resolve. They had taken so much from me, but I still had one thing left, my power to choose what came next. In the weeks after their engagement party, I began to see the situation with new eyes. The pain was still there, raw and heavy, but it started to transform into something else. Clarity. I realised I had been clinging to the idea of Emily as my best friend, as if holding on to the past could erase what she had done. But the truth was undeniable. She wasn't that girl anymore, and maybe she never had been. Accepting that gave me a strange sense of freedom. I started pouring my energy into myself. I signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted from, because my life had revolved around Jason and Emily. For the first time in months, I felt glimpses of joy that didn't carry their shadows. But no matter how much progress I made, they still haunted me. A mutual acquaintance sent me a save-the-date card for their wedding. Seeing their names together in cursive letters made my stomach twist. But instead of crying, I laughed. A bitter, almost hysterical laugh. It was surreal to think that the man I once thought I'd marry was now preparing to marry the woman who had been like a sister to me. One evening, I ran into Jason by chance, outside a bookstore downtown. He looked older, more tired, though maybe that was just my resentment colouring my view. He gave me a small nod, an awkward smile, and said, "I hope you're doing okay." For a moment, I almost asked him why. Why her? Why betray me with the one person he knew would hurt me most? But I swallowed the words. I simply replied, "I'm fine," and walked away. Inside, though, I wasn't fine. That encounter stirred up every question I'd buried. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if Emily ever thought about what she had lost by gaining him. Did she miss me the way I missed her? Or had she erased me completely from her story, rewriting herself as the heroine and me as nothing more than a footnote? The thought stung, but it also lit a spark. If she could erase me, I could erase them too. Not by pretending it never happened, but by building a life so full and strong that their betrayal became irrelevant. Slowly, I began to believe it was possible. The closer their wedding day came, the more I felt the world testing me. Invitations circulated, photos from bridal showers popped up online, and whispers about the dress, the venue, the honeymoon filled conversations I couldn't escape. Every detail was like salt in a wound. Yet, strangely, I found myself growing numb to it all. Pain has a limit, and I think I finally reached it. One evening, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, staring at the city lights, and asked myself what I would gain from holding on to this anger forever. Emily wasn't losing sleep over me. Jason wasn't thinking about how much it hurt me to see him move on with her. They were building a new life while I was still chained to the ruins of the old one. That realisation stung, but it also sparked something inside me. I didn't want to be the bitter ex-girlfriend, or the betrayed friend whose whole story revolved around someone else's choices. I wanted to reclaim myself. Around that time, I started therapy. It wasn't easy at first. Talking out loud about everything made me feel vulnerable all over again. But my therapist gently pushed me to see patterns I had ignored. She asked me why I had put so much of my identity in my relationships, why I had let Emily's approval define me, why I had fought so hard to keep Jason, when deep down I knew we were slipping apart long before she entered the picture. Those questions hurt, but they also gave me power. For the first time, I began to see my own reflection without their shadows. I started journaling daily, filling pages with raw thoughts and emotions. Some entries were angry rants, others were sad confessions, but slowly they became something else. Plans, dreams, ideas about who I wanted to be now that I was free. One Saturday morning, I woke up and decided to take a spontaneous road trip. I drove 3 hours to the coast, walked barefoot on the sand, and let the ocean wind sting my face until I felt alive again. I laughed at myself for feeling so reckless, but in that laughter was healing. That trip reminded me I could still choose joy, even after everything. Yet, no matter how far I travelled, the shadow of their wedding loomed. I knew the date, the place, the people who would be there. And a small part of me still wondered, did Emily ever feel guilty? Standing in a white dress knowing she had burned our friendship to the ground. Or was I the only one still carrying the weight of what we had lost? The morning of their wedding arrived, and though I wasn't invited, it felt impossible to escape it. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and photos from people who thought it was a good idea to send me updates, as if I needed to see Emily in her white gown or Jason waiting at the altar. I silenced every notification, but the images still found their way through, burned into my mind like scars. I tried to distract myself, cooking breakfast, cleaning the apartment, even blasting music to drown out the silence. But nothing worked. Eventually, I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by old photo albums I hadn't touched in years. Pictures of Emily and me at 16, faces glowing with innocence, holding hands like sisters. Pictures of Jason and me on road trips, messy hair and sunburned noses. The kind of moments that once felt endless. As I flipped through the pages, tears slid down my cheeks, not just for what I lost, but for who I used to be. That girl, so full of trust and hope, had no idea how sharp betrayal could feel. And yet, sitting there, I realised something unexpected. Their wedding wasn't about me. Their choices, their lies, their betrayal. None of it defined me unless I let it. For months I had been living like a ghost in their story, but I wanted my own story back. So instead of wallowing, I stood up, showered, put on a bright dress and forced myself out the door. I went to a cafe across town where nobody knew me, ordered a slice of cake and sat by the window watching strangers walk by. It felt strangely liberating to be anonymous, to realise the world was so much bigger than Jason and Emily. At one point, I caught my reflection in the glass and saw not a victim, not a discarded friend, but a woman still standing. A woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, humiliation, and yet still managed to find enough strength to keep breathing. That night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I lit a candle and wrote one final letter I never intended to send. It was to Emily. In it, I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I told her I hoped she found happiness, but that she would never again be part of my life. Folding that letter and tucking it into the back of my journal felt like closing a chapter I had been trapped in for too long. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Weeks passed after their wedding, and something inside me finally shifted. The ache was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I stopped checking for updates, stopped listening to whispers, stopped letting their names fill every corner of my thoughts. Instead, I started building a new rhythm for my life. Mornings with coffee and a walk before work, evenings with books stacked by my bed, pages that carried me into worlds untouched by betrayal. I filled my weekends with little adventures, flea markets, road trips, cooking new recipes that filled my apartment with unfamiliar but comforting smells. Bit by bit, I began to remember who I was before all of this, and more importantly, I started to discover who I could be after. Still, there were moments when anger returned, sharp and hot. Like the day I ran into Emily's sister at the grocery store and she smiled nervously before blurting, "She really hopes you're happy too." I bit my tongue, but inside I wanted to laugh. Happiness? From someone who had stolen the very things that once made me happiest. But instead of spiralling, I walked away. I had learned by then that revenge didn't always mean grand gestures or public confrontations. Sometimes the best revenge was silence, distance, and the undeniable proof that I could thrive without them. One night, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset melt into the horizon, and I realised I no longer felt hollow when I thought of Jason. He was just someone I used to know, and Emily, the girl I once trusted with my soul, had become a stranger wearing a familiar face. The grief of losing them both had been brutal, but it also forced me to grow. It taught me boundaries, self-respect, and the strength to walk away from people who didn't deserve me. I no longer dreamed of confronting them, no longer rehearsed speeches in my head. I didn't need their apologies, their explanations, or their regret. What I needed was my own peace, and slowly I was finding it. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the girl I used to be, the one who believed friendship was unbreakable, that love was enough, that loyalty was forever. I grieve for her, but I also thank her, because she loved deeply and trusted fully. And that isn't weakness, that's bravery. My story didn't end with betrayal. It began again with me. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real victory. Not proving them wrong, not making them pay, but reclaiming my own life with a strength I never knew I had.